Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right in. You know, when we think of ancient religious texts, it's so easy to picture this dusty, rigid rulebook just handed down from antiquity. But what if I told you there's a text out there that reads way less like an instruction manual and more like this epic, incredibly intimate spiritual autobiography? Like one that spans not just decades, but literally countless lifetimes. Today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating manuscript called the Apadāna, specifically Part 1. We're going to unpack its deep theological insights, its stunning literary artistry, and look at how it literally shapes the cultural practices of millions of people today.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. The ultimate spiritual autobiography. 2. 3 levels of enlightenment. 3. The Buddha's remnant karma. 4. Disciples and the rhinoceros. 5. The roots of merit-making. And finally, 6. The taste of liberation.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the ultimate spiritual autobiography. So what exactly are we looking at here?
What's truly fascinating about the Apadāna, which, by the way, is the 13th book of the Khuddaka Nikaya, is its actual format. It is not some dry list of facts. It's actually composed entirely in this beautiful, flowing, poetic verse. It basically functions as a first-person spiritual autobiography of the Buddha himself, the solitary Buddhas, and the enlightened Arahant disciples. Think of it as a massive repository of theology and epistemology, focusing intensely on how karma, both the good and the bad, is accumulated across an almost unimaginable span of past lives.
And this number really hits home the sheer scale of that journey, 30. In the opening section, which is known as the Buddha Purana, scholars point out something absolutely crucial about the concept of pāramī, or perfections. The text makes it super clear that the Buddha's ultimate enlightenment, it wasn't the result of some sudden, magical, supernatural intervention. Actually, it was the direct result of mastering 30 very specific perfections, and doing so through continuous, incredibly arduous effort over an incalculable number of lifetimes. It's basically the ultimate story of perseverance.
Moving on to Section 2, 3 levels of enlightenment. So, how is this incredibly vast journey actually organized?
Well, the architecture of the text brilliantly maps out the hierarchy of Theravāda Buddhist thought, and it divides it into 3 primary descending steps. Right at the top, we have the Buddha Padana, which details the journey of the Supreme Buddha. Next down is the Pacceka Buddhapadana, focusing on solitary Buddhas. And finally, the Theravāda, which covers the enlightened Arahant disciples. This structural flow isn't just an accident. It logically organizes the whole hierarchy of virtue and enlightenment within the religion, perfectly guiding the reader from the absolute highest ideal all the way down to the achievable path of the disciples.
Next up, Section 3, the Buddha's remnant karma. Now, we arrive at what I think is the absolute climax of the text's philosophy, a section known as Pubbā kamma piloti, which roughly translates to the remnants of past karma.
This actually brings us to a highly provocative question, one that challenges a really common misconception. Can enlightenment simply erase your past sins? I mean, does reaching nirvana act as a sort of magical eraser for all the bad deeds you've accumulated over your countless past lives? Let's take a look.
The Apadāna takes a very profound stance on absolute karmic justice here. It's essentially a massive cosmic balancing act. So, erasing old karma? No way. That is completely false. Ending the creation of new karma? That is true. Reaching enlightenment means you stop generating new karmic debts, but you absolutely still have to face the echoes of the old ones. The universe, according to this text, simply demands perfect balance.
And, you know, the text does not shy away from showing exactly how this played out in reality, even for the Supreme Buddha. The Pubbā kamma piloti explicitly details the Buddha's own remnant karma. Because of actions in his distant past lives, even as a fully enlightened being, he faced false accusations, physical attacks, and periods of really severe sickness and disease. Scholars point out that this is vital evidence within the canon. It shows that no one, literally not even the Buddha himself, can escape the absolute justice of the law of karma. It is just an unavoidable reality.
All right, Section 4, Disciples and the Rhinoceros. Let's shift our focus a bit and see how others achieved their liberation.
In the second section, we meet the Pacceka Buddha. Now, this is a fascinating figure. It's someone who attains enlightenment completely independently, entirely by their own effort. But, unlike a Supreme Buddha, they do not go on to establish a religion or teach the masses. And I absolutely love the visual metaphor the text uses for this. They're represented by the solitary horn of a rhinoceros. It's such a striking image, right?
It represents this ideal of total seclusion, a life just completely severed from worldly attachments and social bonds.
Moving on to the final and absolutely largest section of the text, the Theravāda, we encounter an incredible number, over 410. The text intimately details the first-person spiritual journeys of over 410 Arahant disciples. It's this expansive, amazing collection that lets the reader get up close and personal with the individual struggles, the merits, and the ultimate triumphs of all these monks.
And notice how these specific attributes perfectly align. The text connects the legendary attributes of these disciples directly back to the karmic merit they built up in their past lives. So Anyukondanya, he was the first to understand the Buddhist teaching. Rahula possessed a supreme eagerness for training. Subhuti was deemed the most worthy of receiving gifts, and Anuruddha became the absolute master of the divine eye. The Apadāna is showing us that these weren't just random lucky talents. They were deeply, deeply earned over millennia of karmic investment.
Now for Section 5, the roots of merit-making. This brings us to a pretty vital question. Why does a text from eons ago actually matter to us today?
Well, if you travel through Southeast Asia today, you're going to witness some incredibly vibrant cultural traditions. Things like Katina robe offering ceremonies, communities coming together to build temples or viharas, and the sponsoring of monk residences. And according to scholars, these aren't just random cultural habits. They are the literal teachings of the Apadāna in action. The text heavily emphasizes the enormous spiritual benefits of these specific types of giving. So when you see a modern merit-making ceremony, you are quite literally watching the theology of the Apadāna leap right off the page and into the real world.
And hey, while we're connecting the ancient to the modern, scholars have actually highlighted an incredible textual discovery right within the Apadāna, and that's the term Dhammakaya. Today, Dhammakaya is a highly discussed concept and movement within Theravāda Buddhism. Now, some folks might assume it's a strictly modern interpretation. However, the Apadāna proves otherwise. This exact term appears right here in this ancient text, providing foundational evidence that the concept of Dhammakaya has its roots firmly planted in the original Theravāda scriptures. All right, Section 6, the taste of liberation. As we near the end of our explainer, let's look at the ultimate psychological goal of this incredible text. Beyond just the strict theology, the Apadāna is widely considered high religious literature. It utilizes these exquisite metaphors, painting vivid pictures of celestial realms, heavenly worlds, and the radiant light of wisdom. And it does this to evoke something called muti rasa, which means the ultimate taste of liberation. The authors didn't just want you to intellectually understand enlightenment. Through their beautiful poetry, they wanted you to literally feel the joy, the lightness, and the freedom of spiritual liberation as you read it. It really is a masterpiece of using art to elevate the human spirit.
The Apadāna shows us that enlightenment isn't magic, karma is inescapable, and every single small action echoes through eternity. It basically forces us to look at our lives not as isolated events, but as links in a massive, ongoing chain. So I want to leave you with this final thought. If your current life is just one single page in a continuous, epic spiritual autobiography, what chapter are you writing today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.